Salutations, everyone! Welcome to another Total Warhammer 3 guide. I'm Lord Formant, and today we'll be covering the Empire. So, the Empire um, is a race of men who follow Sigmar and have apparently the largest empire in the Warhammer time frame here. And we're going to explain a little bit about the Empire, how they play, then we'll shift into talking about the economy, the technology, and then finally we'll cover quickly, hopefully this time, the different starting lords and their locations. And those will be chaptered, so you don't have to sit here and watch all of that. You can simply jump to whichever lord you're interested in. So, the Empire is a relatively basic faction. If anything, they're kind of like the dwarves. They're almost a new player friendly faction. I think the dwarves are a little bit more new player friendly because the Empire has no particular strengths. They're pretty good all around. So the Empire has different mechanics based off which lord you play as. So we're going to be talking right now about Franz, who's the Reikland, and Balthazar Gelt, who's down here's mechanics. The big one for them is they have this Imperial Authority mechanic, which as elector counts, of which you them, are loyal to the Empire. At the start of the game, Marienburg and Vlad of Sylvania are not loyal to you. And as various elector counts um, die or for some reason get taken over by another elector count or annexed with you, the Imperial Authority will fall. And if it gets all the way to the end, you can hit a civil war. If it goes up, you will stay stable and the elector counts will become more loyal to you. Now, I will point out this faction is pretty much begging for a rework at this point. It's a bit of an outdated mechanic. It comes basically all the way from first Total Warhammer. And so a lot of what I'll say here is subject to change. How the Empire particularly plays, though, the Empire is basically can do everything. The Empire has reasonably strong infantry, reasonably strong range, pretty good cavalry, and some pretty good artillery. So, all told, they're a faction that can adapt better to problems than, say, the Wood Elves or the Dwarves or even the Vampires. They have a counter for most situations. So, the Empire relies on its infantry to a very large degree. Its high level infantry are amazing. Even its base infantry is a cut above the average infantry unit that other factions will have, which means the Empire has a pretty strong early game, like the first 20 turns of game. And I'm talking very early game, and then they fall off until they get to their higher buildings. They tend to focus on developing strong cavalry and then later on very powerful artillery. They've got some of the best artillery in the game. They're also one of the few. They get tanks. They get actual like tanks. They're not like what you would think of real world tanks, but they're still amazingly powerful. They also have access to wizards. They have access to basically all the wizards. Not all of them, but most of them. And this allows them to really customize what type of magic they use, which type of units they use. The Empire is very defensive right now in the game, mainly because there are so many threats facing you from all sides. You've got this guy up here, the Warriors of Chaos. You've got Norska invading from the north. You got another Warriors of Chaos there. You got the Kislevites, who probably won't hate you, but they tend to invade this part of the Empire. And then you've got the vampires to the south. And even in the longer term, eventually the Skaven tend to expand up through the mountains and reach you as well. Not to mention there's greenskins that will periodically invade, and eventually you'll get invaded by more chaos factions from the north. So by and large, the Empire is reactive. This is for Franz mainly. It's a little bit different for Balthazar Gelt, which I'll cover a bit more, but he's a bit defensive. The other two Empire factions are a little more offensive. The Empire it's tough to describe how the Empire plays because they can play any way they like. They are good on offense. They're also fairly good on defense. Their garrison buildings are solid. Can't build one in the Reikland, obviously, so I'll just get another one. Um, you can play them however they want. They only have a couple little weaknesses I will speak to at the moment. The weaknesses are, by the way, don't do what I just did. I was just trying to get another settlement. The weaknesses are they do not have the best replenishment early game. You tend to need to get one of their hero units. I believe it is the warrior priest here from a Shrine of Sigmar to replenish troops, or you need to send your lord down the blue line to get increased replenishment. I believe Franz can go that. Logician that will help with the recovery. So the Empire does not have the best healing. They're really not bad at anything. It's I'm struggling to fully describe how well-rounded the Empire is. They've got a solid economy, just customized to whatever you're fighting. You're fighting the dwarves, bring cavalry and artillery. You're fighting the greenskins, bring more artillery, solid cavalry, and solid infantry. You're fighting the high elves, probably more cavalry. Fighting the dark elves, cavalry. Um, they're not as good at cavalry as the Bretonians, but they add a very nice ability to rout and then kill units for the Empire. I'll quickly cover the Elector Counts mechanic, and then again with the other starting lords, we'll cover their unique mechanics and stuff then. So the Elector Counts here, if a unit holds it, in this case, Franz holds the Reikland, he gets the bonus of the Elector Count of the Reikland, which is an office. So I think you could you can't replace him, but you could replace other lords. He gets a unique weapon. He has a unique regiment of renown, which the game calls a Elector Count State Troops, which refresh every like 15 turns. They're really good. You want to try and get and use virtually all of them. Some of them are really powerful once you get going. And as you annex them or they get destroyed, these offices will disappear, at which point, if you have another candidate, which will be another lord, you can simply drag, place them in there, and they will become an Elector Count, and they will get the bonuses. And you will, by resurrecting an Elector Count seat, you will gain an Imperial Authority. Problem is, a lot of your Elector Counts tend to die rather fast right now. Okay, let's quick cover units, then we'll move into economy. So, just do it from here, because so your basic infantry units, you have spearmen. I do not recommend you build these spearmen units almost ever. They're okay at what they do, but you want spearmen with shields first. You've got long swordsmen, which are shielded. They're a base level infantry unit. They're pretty solid. They're not amazing, but they will hold out against most other melee units that are low leveled. Tier 1, tier 2, they'll do fine against. Archers, your basic range unit. Early on, you're going to build them, but they quickly get obsoleted by the second level infantry units, and at which point you don't really want to build them because they're really weak against armor. Then you have free quarters militia. I have never found this unit useful at all. They kind of have short pistols they fire before fighting in melee, but they're not great at melee and they're not great at range. You might use them if you're Volkmar, and that's about it. Up here, you got your spearmen with shields. This will be your backbone in your unit when you're not fighting other infantry factions. They handle cavalry pretty well. And until you get tier 3 infantry, they're going to be some of the best defensive units you get. You have halberdiers, which is probably one of your best offensive units for a while. They don't have the most amazing stats, but when it comes to actually fighting, they are really good against other infantry because they're armor piercing and they handle cav. Your crossbowmen, just a pure upgrade from your archers, basically. Additional range, additional damage, actually half decent against armor. These will be the bulk of your range units because you don't have a higher level archer. You'll never be able to fight like the high elf archers or the wood elf archers, or even the dwarven archers. But against greenskins and other factions, this will give you a very needed range option. Then you get to your higher level infantry units. Your great swords are pretty much an upgrade from the halberdiers, but they can't fight cavalry as well, but they tend to destroy infantry in combat. Have some amazing defensive garrison battles where one of these has gotten like 300 kills defending walls when enemies trying to climb them. Then you have Huntsman, which is kind of a sideways upgrade from Crossbowmen. They have the same range and they have the same missile strength. The only difference is these guys are anti-large and they can fire while moving, which if you're going to run away from the enemy, leave your units in skirmish mode, this will make them stronger. And they can stalk so you can get ambushes off. I tend not to use these because they can't outrun some infantry units, and cavalry will absolutely obliterate them. But if you're going to be trying to have a slightly mobile force with ambushes, might do okay. Otherwise, stick with the crossbowmen. And then you have one of your unique heroes, your Empire Captain. These guys are solid melee units. They don't have the most amazing melee stats, but they hold out a lot better than you would expect when it comes to actually fighting. Um, it's worth having one or two at each of your armies. They're good lord killers or they're good horde killers. You can kind of build them however you like. I have very rarely seen them die to basic or even mid-level infantry. Over here, you get your cavalry. You have your Empire Knights, which, despite their stats, are not absolutely amazing. So they're very quickly eclipsed by your higher level cav. So I tend not to even really build them that much. They're solid for their job, but they don't tend to beat other cav in combat. You have Pistoliers. I really don't build this at all. They're basically a skirmishing cavalry unit, but they don't have a ton of range. They don't have a ton of ammunition, and they really kind of suck at melee. They're okay. If you get one or two of them, they will tend not to die because they'll just keep running away, but they don't tend to kill stuff. Above that, you've got. Oops. Thank you, game. Can you actually stop focusing on that? Whatever. You have the Knights of the Blazing Sun, which is a fairly solid unit. It does fire damage, so if you pull them into combat when you're fighting vampires, they do extra damage to undead stuff. Um, they are fairly solid. Um, it really helps slowing down the vampire counts healing. Then next to that, if I can get there, what is up with this game right now? Be a sec. Okay. I want to look at this unit. There you are. You have Outriders, which are an upgraded form of Pistoliers with much greater range, more missile strength, and more ammunition. If you wanted Pistoliers, these are a better form. Build these guys. And then finally, if I can get to it, on game. Wow. Sorry about this. I don't know what is causing this trouble. Outriders with grenade launchers. Uh, these are really good at killing units, surprisingly. Well, or not surprisingly, because they literally fire grenades at people. They are not as good at skirmishing or armor penetration, but they kill trash units fairly effectively. It might be worth bringing one or two of them to the battlefield if you want to use grenades. And then the final levels of the tree here, you have your Demigryph Knights, which are flying. I believe that, yeah. Can they fly? I thought they could fly. Oh, maybe I'm wrong. No, that's the Bretonians. They are just solid cav units. They're not your best cav units, but they're really good. Your best cav actually comes from. Where is the best cav? They not. Ah, here's the best cav unit in my opinion. You get the Reiksguard, armored shield, heavy cav, good at melee combat, good at melee defense. Technically, their stats are on par or slightly worse with the Demigryph Knights. I tend to just find that the right guard works better for their job. Plus, you tend to be able to upgrade them, get them, and recruit them at higher levels. Um, your standard cataphract type unit. They're heavy cav. You can throw them into a fight. They'll do a good job versus other cav. They'll do a good job versus infantry. The only case is if you're going to be fighting a lot of cav, might be worth grabbing a Demigryph Knight. They are anti-large, which means they have a bonus against cav and monsters. Then over here, you've got your gunpowder units. You've got your handgunners. They will basically destroy anything given enough time to shoot at it. The trick is to get them to shoot, which means you have to place them in such a way that they can fire in a straight line to the enemy, no arching like arrows, which means you either have to flank with them or you have to find a way to stagger your front line that they can get clear shots off. They're good though. Your war wagons, missile chariot that kind of runs away, does damage. They're okay. I've never had them be amazingly effective at getting kills, but then again, they've never really died either. You've got your first artillery unit, mortars. Mortars have their place at killing enemy infantry. You get a couple of these in the enemy line and they will kill them. Only downside is they're not particularly accurate, but if you're a really good player, you can manually control their shots and they will do a lot of damage. Up here, you've got upgraded war wagons with basically artillery on them. These are a pretty straight upgrade to your war wagons. I find they do more damage. They're a little bit more effective. They don't fire as fast though, but that just happens to be the way it is. You get great cannons, which is not a direct upgrade from your mortars because they have a different firing arc. Uh, I honestly prefer the mortars, but they're pretty solid. But you'd be better off going with the Hellstorm rocket battery. These things are monsters. Given time or given a couple volleys that hits directly, they will obliterate units. They fire tons of missiles. They have a very long range, and they hit really hard with armor piercing. Great against factions like the dwarves. You will literally just blast the dwarves out of existence. Against wood elves, it's almost a joke if they get hits off because the wood elves can't survive anything, and it does a lot of damage. You get Hellblaster volley guns. By the time you're getting up to this point, you kind of know how to play. Solid unit. You'll enjoy using them, but the cream of the crop here is the steam tank. These things are unbreakable, armored, do lots of damage, hard to kill. They're just great. You want late game armies should have at least one or two of them in your army. They will usually return the cost with interest in terms of damage to the enemy. Just be aware that armor piercing units can kill them, as does magic. They don't have any particular resistance to magic. But they're really good at killing things. They tend not to even get destroyed in melee combat. It's really fun to use. I will make special mention of the blacksmith here because the blacksmith is required to unlock them. So to get a lot of your good units, you also have to build an armory in the same region. Plus increase recruitment rank, which is really nice, and ranks. Over here, you get some of your other units. You get your flagellants, which are basically almost like dwarven slayer units. They're macemen who are kind of suicidal. They don't run away. They fight to the death. They do pretty decent damage. I find they die rather quickly. If you can flank with them, they're good. Otherwise, don't expect them to survive because their melee defense sucks. That's about it for them. Then you've got your warrior priests. Warrior priests are kind of like a hybrid caster unit. They're not bad at combat, but their big thing is they have these prayers that buff troops around them. Plus, they replenish your troops and are very useful for that reason. Then you have all your mages. I'm not going to get into the magic. Find ones you like. Fire tends to be bright wizards are half decent. Some of these are stronger at fighting. Others are not. Make of it what you will. And the last unit you get is witch hunters. Witch hunters are kind of like an assassin unit for the battlefield or the campaign map. They come armed with a pistol. They're pretty decent at killing lords. They've got an ability, Accuse, that does damage to enemy lords. And I tend to use them on the battlefield more because they cleanse corruption, the map, not the battlefields, because they cleanse corruption, which if you send a bunch of these into vampiric territory before you invade, you can lower the corruption quickly. They also can assassinate enemy heroes, slow down movement, and damage walls. They're much more useful to send into enemy territory than, say, a warrior priest, which can wound, damage, or hinder, or even a wizard, which can steal, attack, wound, or assault. Or this guy, which can assault or wound. They can actually kill. They can actually set things up. They're very useful on the campaign map. You get them from the second level. So let's talk economy. So the Empire has a fairly solid economy. To some degree, it relies on trade, but it does have some fairly solid infantry buildings. Your basic one is a Weaver House, which is 500 gold, gives 250 a turn, builds in one turn, repays its cost after a couple, all the way up told. Even fully upgraded takes 3 turns to repay the cost to build it, which is really good in this game. You're going to want to stick these pretty much wherever you can afford one. long as it doesn't take away from building a garrison building, which I do recommend you build. Empire garrisons are solid. Plus, the walls mean your Empire troops can hold them very, very easily, except versus artillery. The Empire has a solid growth building, which I do recommend you build because of growth, but also because of the casualty replenishment. The Empire does very well with high level buildings because it unlocks your artillery and high level cav. They have got a control building, which you're going to have to build this tavern hostelry. Probably one each province just to maintain your control, since almost none of your other buildings give control. They have this paved roads, which boost income and movement range. This might be worth putting one in each capital settlement, especially if the province is making money, and it will allow you to shoot across the empire as if your troops have rocket boots. They have a Night's Watch. I do mention this because the Empire does start with several Skaven undercities scattered around them. Um, you're better off moving a group of heroes from settlement to settlement to protect the Undercity than building this. But it does give control and it does reduce corruption, which is actually makes it almost as good an option as a tavern or as good as a Shrine of Sigmar. You might actually want to build these up north if you're dealing with a lot of chaos, corruption, and stuff. It's worth mentioning the Shrine of Sigmar here because this is one of your few corruption removing buildings. It removes a good amount of corruption when upgraded. Basically, you won't have to deal with corruption in that province, especially if you back it up with either a protection building or a tavern building. The Empire has pretty good resource management, even stuff like their cattle ranches bring in money. Plus, fully upgraded, they do discounts to your full armies. So keep an eye out for resources. The Empire, first off, within the Empire, you can usually trade with all the other Elector counts, but the Empire also gets along pretty well with the dwarves on your borders, Bretonia eventually. Even the High Elves don't dislike you. So, what you're going to want to do, stick weavers places, stick fields to grow your buildings. Definitely throw garrison buildings in where you can. Garrisons are worth it. Getting a level 3 Empire settlement taken is really a pain because of the sheer amount of money your minor settlements generate. I wouldn't particularly throw a industry building in your capital settlements unless you're not going to ever use it to train units, mainly because the Empire has a lot of buildings you produce good units. Thankfully, if you play as Franz, you have Altdorf, which is a huge settlement, so you can build most everything. And the Empire has some pretty decent edicts. Which one helps you? They've got a good income. They've got a good trading boost one. I really like their edicts. Probably all this is going to be reworked at some point, but this should give you an idea because I doubt they'll change the buildings too much. Okay, let's quick talk technology. So the Empire has a fairly nice tech tree. It only has a couple things locked behind upgrading a capital settlement. And this does vary slightly based off which lord you play, and I'll try to remember to mention those. So, as you can see, you've got an infantry cav, war machines range, trade industry, colleges, which tends to boost technology, and then diplomatic. Diplomatic's really nice, and I make a special mention here because it improves relations with your neighbors. It is worth getting these with Bretonia, dwarves, high elves, and the Empire and the Southern Realms. I would recommend if you're going to buy one of these, you try and buy the Emissary to the Prince of Altdorf, which is Franz, because it gives you control, which is helpful for the Empire, but it also means it's easier to keep the Empire intact. So both Gelt and Franz is very solid with. They also have a purge line down here, which you can kind of customize to which you're fighting. Definitely buy this one once you start fighting the vampire counts. But even getting a ruinous breed early on isn't bad, especially if you have to go take out the warrior chaos guy who's squatting up north in the Empire. Basically, buy these when you're fighting the faction. Don't buy them until you are. They're one turn, so that's nice. In terms of what to start, though, I recommend your first tech be Tithe Rebates here. It gives you growth and it gives you control. Things every faction can use, plus the Empire needs control. Afterwards, it's a little bit up to you, but I tend to snag local militia, mainly because you're going to be training and losing a fair amount of infantry early on. And this will just make your swordsmen and your spearmen even better. and cheaper to raise. Afterwards, it's kind of up to you what you're going to do. If you're Franz or you're Gelt and you're going to be fighting the vampires, you definitely want to go for Clergy of Sigmar because it's your only technology that reduces corruption. Plain and simple. It also boosts your warrior and witch hunters. That's not a huge thing. You'll get a couple boosts to income along the way. Afterwards, or instead of that, you could also do assembly line here, which boosts your income from industry. So your 500 gold weaving building now is 550. It's a nice boost, but the big prize comes if you can then go and snag the Engineers Guild, which increases your research rate by 10%. It's not huge, but it saves you 1 turn every 10 turns of research, and as you can see, it's going to take you a while to research everything. If you're not under active threat and you want to get a better long-term bonus, snag this before you move elsewhere. If you're under an active threat, go down your infantry tree. Start with state troop standards, then probably go straight to state-issued weapons because melee defense bonuses are rare and they make your infantry, which is pretty solid, even better. State-issued infantry armor should follow, followed by heavy weapons. Afterwards, you probably don't have cav going yet. If you do, pursue the cav, get inner circle. I would instead probably focus on missile stuff, increased range, increased missile damage. This one I tend to avoid because I don't use pistoliers and outriders. If you do, use it. You definitely want to snag the upgrades to the artilleries, increased ammunition, increased reload rate. You don't really need the missile resistance, but it's up to you. And it's basically research what you need when you're going to use it. The Empire is a pretty much blank slate. You can customize it. You can use it however you want. So let's talk lords. So base 1, the one that everyone knows, the face of Total Warhammer 1, is Karl Franz. He is Prince and Empire, his rights by Sigmar's crowns. You get the story. He's got slightly better relations with the Empire, increased recruit for his lords, and he moves farther. I expect this bonus to be reworked at some point, along with the Imperial Authority, so take what I say with a grain of salt. In terms of an actual lord, Franz is a pretty solid one. He can fight most people. He's got his unique sword with him, which boosts his melee strength even higher, and his allies. So he really doesn't need much more melee attack. Defense, he's not so great. He's also not necessarily the best at fighting other enemies, like other lords, but he's okay. He's got a pretty basic blue route here. Marching, you want to snag. I tend to avoid Disciplinarian. Leader of Renown can be nice. If you stack it with the tech, you'll get 30% off infantry, which is solid. Reassuring, reduce casualties. I wouldn't do this unless you're standing in Vampire Council lands or invading the Chaos Wastes. Until then, you're much better off getting Fervent. Feverent, however people say it, it will reduce the corruption. Irrepressible is great because the Empire does rely on its lords. You want several lords, and you want one lord and multiple heroes in the armies. Very nice. Lightning Strike can be solid if you're fighting enemies like the vampires who might have multiple armies invading you. Otherwise, you're much better off with Logician to replenish your armies. This is always worth taking. Basically, rule of thumb is the Empire. If you see any way to get more casualty replenishment, take it. Quartermaster will help decrease the cost. Alert is not as great on Franz, mainly because you have a low ambush detection chance already, but it's worth getting if you're getting ambushed by Skaven. Headhunter, again, increased recruit rank. You can get some pretty powerful infantry, and an increased recruitment capacity is really nice. The Empire tends to have the ability to raise armies in 1 to 2 turns much faster than other nations. Red line's pretty solid. Early on, going down the Empire's finest here, getting a boost to your basic level infantry can be really solid. And later on, getting upgrades to, say, getting a word save on your artillery, specifically steam tanks, is really nice. And finally, the final upgrades here, like strength of hardship and stuff, is worth getting on Franz because he tends to be recruiting level 4 or level 5 infantry straight out of the gate. So this might allow you to get... it'll strengthen your level 7 units, which ideally you want to keep your armies alive. Even though the Empire can rebuild them, this will make them stronger. Now, in terms of other stuff, he's got a standard yellow line. Boosting his melee defense tends to be more of a priority than melee attack, but it's still worth snagging. Getting additional health is nice. Franz can handle plenty of low-level infantry himself. And then his unique stuff, this one, increase leadership for your basic infantry units, increase bonuses for your greatswords, for your right guard, for your empire captains. This one's great and you should always snag it. Increase recruit rank. Now your infantry is going to be at minimum level 5 when you recruit it, plus decreased upkeep. Stack it with quartermaster, almost 20% off upkeep. Plus headhunter, 27. Yeah, it's pretty nice. And then Empire's Journey makes him do more damage and become unbreakable. Since he's a powerful lord, this does help quite a bit. In terms of up stuff, he'll eventually get a griffin, which is really solid. Leader of Men is worth mentioning here because it does reduce the upkeep for your right guards and greatswords, which are your top line unit. And Hold the Line you should snag early on because it's just a good buff to your melee, and Franz tends to fight on the front lines, so this will strengthen your infantry around him. In terms of his actual moves, he starts at war with the Empire Successionists, which will be your first several opponents. Don't do what I did earlier in this guide and lose all your infantry. Instead, fight the first battle, recruit more units, take Runberg, or manually fight it. You might lose a few low-level infantry. Try not to lose your greatswords and your halberdier. Definitely don't lose your artillery and your Reichsguard. Find some more units. You're going to be losing quite a few of these swordsmen, so don't get attached to them. Build up for a couple more turns, move to here. The Empire Successionist should move to counter you in Ubersreich. Train more, attack. Even if it's a Pyrrhic victory, so long as you don't lose your good infantry. Feel free to lose all of your swordsmen and spearmen, or even your archers. Try not to lose your crossbowmen that you have. Or sorry, your handgunners. After that, rebuild, take Wulhart, leave Helmgart for last because it's a fort. You might need a second army. Train one, take it. Afterwards, you have no immediate threats in the area. With the change from Total Warhammer 2 to 3, Skarsnik is no longer a problem. You tend not to get invaded by orcs early on, so you can kind of then turn your attention to the Empire. In my runs of testing this, by the time I had consolidated the entire Reikland region, 2 elector counts died, so I had negative imperial authority. That is almost definitely going to need a rework given time. You want to save up prestige so that you can prevent civil wars and buy imperial authority when you get random events. But the odds are you're going to either have to go east to Ostmark, this area, to try and reinstate Ostermark and gain control of that province. Right up here is the seat. If you need to, that's a place to go. I tended to find that I needed to wipe out these warriors of chaos first because they were causing havoc with plagues. Franz on his own is unlikely to be able to take Brass Keep, but if you move him up, usually one of these provinces is taken, take it back, build it up, sit in ambush stance outside of it once you no longer have corruption, and you can keep killing their armies, which is nice money and loot. Sometimes the beastmen get a Bridgestone. If so, you want to prioritize that over the Warriors of Chaos. Get a second army after you've built up your economy. Send it up. Take the keep. Wipe out the Warriors of Chaos. You might have some issues with Norska or beastmen up here. Finish them off. You have orcs here. The orcs up here are not a huge priority. They don't actually control a empire seat. So unless they go to war with you or are killing your electors, you can leave them alone for now. It's not a bad idea to kill them off, though, if you can. Just be aware they're Black Pit here, and their units they're solid. If you can, push the enemy back to the sea, get some forts there. But I think what's more likely to happen is the vampires will be going on a rampage. So Vlad or Isabella tend to start conquering everything in this area. You're going to have to move to counter them. Make sure you go with warrior priests and witch hunters to counter their corruption and deal with the replenishment. I recommend trying to take Obersteyr, then Tempelhof, at which point you have striking range at most of their other stuff. If need be, you can sneak in the bottom way through Salt Haven or whatever it is. But you're better off getting Tempelhof, purging the corruption there, getting a garrison, and then periodically rushing out to take the other provinces. Drakenhof doesn't have a legendary garrison anymore, so it can fall to a single army, but the odds are you're going to need a second one. Just be aware the vampires rebuild their armies almost every turn. So after you've won a battle, you really need to take a settlement, because if you have to stop and replenish, they are going to have another army by the time you advance again. They have no range, so artillery and range units are pretty good. Just be aware they have powerful cavalry and monsters, so you're going to need lords to kill those and fight the cav. Their blood knights in particular are to be feared. Your Reiksguard will die to them. Not careful. And that's about it. At that point, you can kind of expand wherever you want. I tended to leave the mountains alone down here, leave the dwarves to deal with that. You may have to go there. Marienburg tends to die in my experience, at which point you want to move in and take it. They have a dock that generates a lot of money. Plus, it's an elector count seat. It's not worth going to war with them unless you have to, mainly because you have other threats on your borders. But if you see an opportunity to take them out or just colonize the ruins of Marienburg, take it. Kislev up here will be your friend. You want to ally with them. Trade agreement, probably defensive pact. They tend not to cause much trouble. Try and prevent civil wars among the elector counts or kill them. I found it easier just to keep them happy, build up the allegiance and fealty, and then annex them. At that point, go wherever you like, probably north towards the Chaos Wastes rather than south, but it's up to you. Okay, here we are. Balthazar Gelt, the Supreme Patriarch, the Metal User, the guy who wears the golden mask, which must be worth a fortune. Gelt is probably one of the biggest factions that are legendary lords that needs a rework. His start is boring. His start is uninteresting. You can kind of do a lot with it. It's almost definitely getting reworked. Total Warhammer 2, you had a orc army here that would attack your fort. They still start there, but they're no longer at war with you. Expect that to change. You can defend the level 1 fort against that attack if you play it. The battle auto-resolve won't do it. You'll see we're 8 turns into the game. I just wanted to show you how boring this is. We're not at war with anybody. There's nothing going on. You start out with a level 1 capital settlement. It's not great. Start at war with the greenskins over here in Steingart. Build up your troops, kill them. You can do it usually by turn 1 or turn 2, depending on how many you lose. Try not to lose your great swords or your artillery units, but feel free to lose most of your trash units. At which point, you've got one province, not including a fort, and no one hates you. There are no enemies to your south, where there used to be greenskins at this point. I expect that to change. There is this Gristle Valley over here that you could colonize. There is an orc faction that wanders your lands. I find if you're strong enough, they simply migrate out. If you want, you can try and kill them, but be aware if they take one of your provinces, they'll settle there and become a little bit harder to dislodge. You have no real source of income. Your capital settlement does have a legendary landmark, which you will want to build. Franz had several in Altdorf as well that I didn't talk about, but they're pretty simple. This one, on the other hand, deserves mention. It boosts your income in the province and gives you gold, something Gelt desperately needs. This province, to be honest, kind of sucks. Previously, you could invade the mountains down here against the dwarves. I don't recommend doing it, mainly because why fight the dwarves if you don't have to? Instead, use this time where you've got a stable base and nothing else going on to invade the vampires. I can freely leave my capital without worrying about it dying. The vampires are still on their rise. If I get in here early and take Schwarzhofen, and then I might even be able to snag Drakenhof or one of their other ones, it would set the vampire counts considerably back. They rely on having several turns to build up. Gelt, right now, he's got nothing going on, is a perfect lord to go fight them, because you're going to have to fight them anyway. He has the same annoying imperial authority as Franz, except he's in a lesser position to stabilize the empire, because he doesn't get as much siege, and the events are a little bit more expensive and harder for him to handle. He does, on the other hand, have armor on all his armies, so all his units are harder to kill, which in some ways makes his units better than Franz in the long run. I still like Franz better, most people do. His battle wizards are cheaper and stronger, indicating his role as the Supreme Patriarch. Use magic. He uses magic and artillery are his faction strengths. In terms of his actual skill, he has a transmuter, which increases ranks of battle wizards, decreases costs for lore magic, and makes his artillery stronger. If you watched the Franz section before this, sorry I forgot to mention what Franz traits are. You can find out. He's got a standard blue line. If you're going to go fight the vampires, definitely fervent. Might even get Reassuring Presence. Definitely get Logician. Finish him off. You will get access to his Lore of Magic of Metal. Definitely upgrade Searing Doom and Genna's Golden Hounds, both of which kill units. The robe is nice. You already have armor though, so it's not as useful. Plague of Rust is good against armored units. Unfortunately, a lot of the vampire units, with the exception of Blood Knights and Graveguards and Lords, don't tend to have a lot of armor anyway. Metal Shifting is worth snagging for the armor, pen, and base magic of all your allies when you cast a spell. You should basically, if you fight the vampires, upcast Searing Doom by double clicking on it twice. Drop it on them. It can kill whole regiments of skeletons and zombies. It's quite possible for Gelt to walk away with like 400 kills versus them. He is not a fighter though, so don't send him into melee combat. He can hold his own, but he's not great. His upgrades though, at level 12, he gets increased armor, which is nice. Means a little harder to kill. He gets stronger than steel. Every unit in his army gets more armor. Remember, his faction trait is 10 armor, so this is an additional almost 20 armor on all his units. Plus, if you research the infantry technology, that gives another 15. You're looking at like 40 additional armor on all your units, which is really nice, except if you fight armor piercer enemies. Your formulations increase missile strength. For gun units, I tend to find it really helps the handgunners. I don't tend to use the other ones that much. Orb of Sorcery, Luminarch unit, and Steam Tank. I forgot to talk about the Luminarch, but it helps with your steam tanks. Renowned Scholars, again, increases the battle wizards. Cheaper to recruit, higher levels. You'll be getting like level 7 or 8 wizards. It's really nice. Metal to Gold to Magic, increases income, local province, and higher chances of wins of magic. He gets a Pegasus Quicksilver, which is good, so he can fly above the battle and use it. Just be aware against other flying units, they will tend to kill him in the air. Or Master of Metals, if you can, grab it. It will allow you to upcast Searing Doom and get as Golden Hounds more. Hold the line, standard Empire one. It's worth stagging. Keep him behind your front lines. They will hold longer. Obviously, standard Master Resistance. Transmutation of Lead. This is very good for targeting enemy lords. You cast this in an area, the people will do less damage and less melee attack, where units can tend to win, even though your infantry unit might not be stronger. It can be very powerful against factions like the dwarves or the vampires. You can reduce like zombie attack to nothing. Final Transmutation should be used on enemy lords. It does considerable damage. It hits for 16 seconds, does between 66 and 133 damage. It targets an enemy, it keeps hitting them. It's very good against the vampire counts because they rely so heavily on heroes and lords. Cast it on one of them when they're mid to low health, and it will tend to kill them. Be aware that they do heal some. And then, of course, the standard magic upgrades. It's worth snagging. This quest is worth mentioning here because the Cloak of Molten Metal does do a Winds of Magic decrease. And Amulet of Seagold, if you get it, will help purging the vampire lands. And of course, he's got another one which increases the rank of Battle Wizard. They're worth getting when you can get them just because he's a magic user, so it will boost them. And that's about it. He's a kind of a boring lord right now. Probably will get a rework. Take him, take your capital lands, build up a little bit, invade the vampires. You've got a buffer state between them, so even if you lose the army, you just rebuild and go in again. On to the next lord. Okay, the next lord, Marcus Wulhart, a huntsman general. This is another person whose start and mechanics will probably be changed a little bit. Still solid at the moment, but it definitely could use him. So you are way down here in Lustria rather than, the Empire. Basically, the lore is he's been sent by Franz to defend the colonies. Unfortunately, the colonies are up here, and they tend to die no matter what you do. You have some very unique mechanics. The first one is he cannot recruit good units. He relies early on from reinforcements, which you get periodically. In this case, 4 turns. And it will slow, and they bring powerful units. You can get top of the line Empire units from the beginning. You get better Huntsman generals, and the Lizardmen hate you, making it one of the few cases where you are a good faction that other good factions particularly hate. Kind of unique, but it follows his lore. Basically, you have this Empire's Mandate up here. As this grows up, you will get different and better supplies and unlock the ability to ability to actually build good buildings. And finally, that's kind of how you win. Um, it also gives you stronger Imperial Supply ranked units. They'll rank higher. This hostility, as you attack, defeat, fight, and have different events, this will grow. As it grows, your Imperial supplies, which are the shipments of units, will come more often. But your provinces will be less loyal, but it does strengthen the enemies at the full level. And then finally, if you max it out, which maxing it out isn't a bad idea, you'll get Imperial supplies basically the next turn, and the hostility level will reset, and an army will spawn and try and kill you. Not a huge threat, but it is annoying because everybody around you gets stronger. Um, Marcus himself is a pretty powerful range unit. He's almost on par with the Elven range unit. He hits hard. He's got some very good cast. Focus shot here does extra damage against low level hit enemies, which is great for sniping injured enemy lords or other various ones. Can do a half decent job at killing things and stuff. He basically is a standard blue line. His unique stuff is he gets decreased cooldown on how fast and how powerful he attacks, which is already solid. He's very good at killing lords or monster units, but against dinosaurs particularly. And you want to upgrade all of that. And finally, Executioner is very powerful as well. Be a little bit hard to hit with the ability just because it's a magic missile spell. I find they're a little finicky. It's better in Total Warhammer 3 than 2. Be aware of that. His final upgrades, he gets increased recruits. Nice. He is harder to kill in melee combat or ranged. His army replenishes better. Stack this with Logician. He has probably the best replenishment of all the Empire Lords. And of course, if you put a Warrior Priest in there, it will be even higher. The regular elite, following his archer traits, make Huntsman better. This is the guy who wants to use Huntsman rather than Crossbowman. This makes a difference. They do more damage, they have more melee attack. It also makes the archer units a little bit better as well. Sleight of hand, double shot, extra projectiles. His Huntsman units attack more and with more damage. He also reloads faster. Telescopic aim increases further. Sundering destroys armor when he hits. All the better for him to kill things from miles away. And his Grand Huntsmarshal allows him to kind of gather his troops around the battlefield and makes it so they're immune to psychology, which helps if you fight vampires or other units that have fear. I would not upgrade his melee line that much. The only thing worth mentioning is his Hunter's Snare. If you can get it, it allows you to lock down an enemy lord and then shoot them. That's about it. Not very good in melee combat. He's not bad. He shouldn't be in melee combat because he's a ranged archer. Gets the ability Amber Bow if you complete his quest, which allows him to do different magic missiles and increases his magic missile strength. So it's worth snagging when you can get it. In terms of his bonus, he is a captain of scouts, so his archers and huntsmen are cheaper. Don't bother building too many archers. Once you can get huntsmen, just build the huntsmen. They're so much better. He's very good at ambushing, and he can run through trees. He is a very slow defensive style play where you have strong units, but you expose your bases, sit in ambush, and kill the factions that try and take your lands, and then counterattack taking lands as it goes. He starts in the Temple of Kara, which is northern Austria. Down south, it's worth noting that Bordeaux, one of the Bretonnian factions, exists and tends to expand there, which can be a half decent ally or at least not a threat for a while. So that allows you to go west rather than having to go south. Pick out this army. Don't take this settlement. You won't have enough troops. Instead, take a turn, build some spearmen, build some archers, take it. Your goal here is to take Spectazuma as soon as you can, get a capital settlement, and then start building up. Be aware that you have orcs to the north that attack you. There's dark elves down to the west, which will eventually become a problem. And given enough time, the vampire coast faction, vampiric pirates, tend to become an annoyance as well. But mainly, your job is to kill lizardmen. You have a unique mechanic here in Wulfhart's Hunters, which are powerful immortal heroes, which are great to get. You want to get them all when you can. There are like 5 of them. The easiest one to get is this guy. Basically, just declare war on this mutineers turn 1. they pretty much will never get to your lands because the Vampire Coast faction there, under the insane vampire guy, will kill them, but it will snag you your first hero. They have several missions that, as you progress, completing the objectives will level them up, give them unique abilities, strengths, experience, and weapons. Do them all, they're worth getting. In fact, it's part of your victory conditions. It's really nice to move places. This one, getting hostility, is reasonably easy. You get a powerful elven archer. This one is a Bretonnian fighter. Takes a little while to get, but is anyway, having immortal heroes is great. Let's just put it that way. Stick them all in Wulfhart's army, and you've got an army that can pretty much take on anybody in the game. Especially once you get imperial supplies, you have a choice between infantry, range, artillery, and cavalry. For the start, I tend to recommend either taking the cav if it gets you right guard, or otherwise taking the artillery, mainly because you won't be able to build artillery for a long time, and artillery is very much a power leveler. It will kill things. Don't worry about too much about infantry. The empire-based infantry is good enough. Plus, as you progress, you will be able to start to get better buildings. You can get halberdiers, you can get spearmen and crossbowmen immediately. You'll have to level up your mandate, get to the better stuff, and to get your huntsmen. But it's not too hard to get that level up. So focus on getting a base going. Barracks, garrisons, definitely stick garrisons places. You get a claim for building ports, which kind of indicates you should expand along the coast. Trying taking out these greenskins to your north is not a bad job. If you can, you'll save the New World colonies. I find they die, but their land isn't bad as well. Just be aware, any lizardman faction you find is going to try and kill you, and they do hit hard. You're going to want huntsmen and powerful units to handle them. Don't expand too fast. It's very easy to get swarmed, especially with the Corn faction down here. Just expand slowly, steadily build up, stick garrisons, get supplies, slowly build up your acclaim, and win the game that way. Okay, time for the last legendary lord of the Empire, Volkmar the Grim, the Cult of Sigmar. Praise be to Sigmar and all that. So, similar to how one of the vampire counts, Manfred, got thrown down here into the desert, Volkmar has followed him pretty much in pursuit. They're both all about the books of Nagash. Um, it's worth trying to get them when you can. They're scattered around the world, so it's not going to be easy to do so. I just will mention that that's kind of your objective. There's only one nearby you can get. The rest require quite a bit of expansion, mainly over mountains or oceans. So your goal there, if you want to pursue that rather than conquer things and then find the books, is build up a strong power base with 2 armies and then send Volkmar on quests to go find it. He starts in Sudenburg, which unfortunately does not have any unique buildings. I fully expect a rework of the Empire as a result of how boring his Gelt and the Huntsman guys' starts are. They just don't fit the game currently. So expect this to change somewhat. Sudenburg is level 2, which is great because it allows you to upgrade to getting spearmen with shields and crossbowmen. You don't have any income though. You're at war with these Tomb Kings. You want to take Plain of Tuskers, and then if you can, you want to rush over and get Bargar up here. Be aware, Manfred is right over here. He is going for the same location as well. Basically, early on, you're going to have to kill Manfred, or Manfred's going to kill you, which is both good and bad. Your basic infantry, level 2, of course, is better than the vampire's infantry at that point. Your average swordsman can handle their skeletons in straight fight. The issue becomes their lords and healings. It might take a little bit of work. You do start with a witch hunter, so you could try and assassinate Manfred's hero unit. He starts with a witch king, I believe, and it does help with the cleansing of corruptions, but by and large, you want to stick him in Volkmar's army. Helps quite a bit because he's good at killing. You want to take out this guy, take this land. Just want to build up fast. You want to take Bargar and Manfred's starting provinces, which both have strategic locations in them or gemstones. If you can, that is where your to be income is. Expect to expand here. This is one of the few factions where it might be worth taking the Purge of the Foul or, well, Purge of the Foul wouldn't be bad for fighting Manfred if you've got the money. Purge of the Foul is pretty solid because a lot of the people you're going to fight in the area are either Skaven or Lizardmen. You don't have anything, unfortunately, to help you with the Tomb Kings. On the other hand, the Tomb Kings don't particularly hate you. They are a particular potential ally once you've killed off a Tomb King, which means they're going to hate you for a while. The unique things about the Cult of Sigmar is that his Witch Hunters and Warrior Priests are stronger, and his Flagellants, Empire Knights, and Free Company's Militia are better against infantry. This might be one of the few guys I would actually use Free Company Militia on. They can shoot the vampires, and then they can actually kill them in combat. Flagellants and Empire Knights get a lot stronger, which is good because they both needed boosts, and he's got a cooldown to battle prayers. Volkmar himself is in fact a warrior priest. Allows you to see all the different prayers he boosting allies, damage resistance, damage in general, and then a huge cooldown to them. He's going to be casting a lot of them, buffing his. To start though, I would actually go down the prayer route, trying to get to at least Grand Soulfire, if not Second Nature. Then probably Route Marcher. Probably you'll need Fervent to purge the vampiric corruption. If you don't, inspiring presence to boost his troops even further is not a bad thing to do, at which point you kind of do whatever you want. He gets a War Altar of Sigmar, which is interesting because it comes with the banishment. You can see it on the left. I can't actually get to it. Increases the collapsing of units that are unroutable but instead lose when their leadership gets low. It helps with that. Hold the line, obviously get it. Will help you a lot with the vampires. Once you get to level 12, if you haven't killed the vampires, this will help you finish them off. You should have already at this point. Tools of Absolution, Flaming Attacks makes fighting vampires significantly easier. Blessed Holy War, increase the Corruption Purge. War Eternal, makes your units hit harder, move faster, do more damage. And the Works of God finally has an insane casualty replenishment rate in your lands, making him better than the Huntsman at replenishment. Even though I had said earlier under the Huntsman section that I was wrong. Obviously, you have to get quite a high level to get it. You do want Logician, though, prior to that, because it will help. Headhunter is also nice. So the strategy for him, build up, try and take what land here you can to prevent Manfred from getting it. Ideally, if you can, take Vargar, declare war on Manfred, set up an ambush right outside of it, ambush, wipe out Manfred's army, and then counterattack. They start with a level 2 settlement as well, I believe, which means the garrison sucks, which means if you can get there early and hit hard, you can take its capital. Without his capital and the ability to train more troops, Manfred will swiftly collapse. All he has to expand to is here. You can wipe him out, gain control of 2 provinces, 5 settlements, and then you'll build up. You'll probably get attacked by either the Lizardmen, the Ogres up north, or you can get attacked from all directions. This is like the Rumble Pit of Total Warhammer 3. In terms of his stuff, you definitely want to consider the fact that Sigmar's will here changes. I forgot to mention the changes for the Huntsman General. People can find that out themselves. This does a decrease for Flagellants, makes them hit harder, do more damage, and also increases the range of his prayers. These are really good Flagellants, which are not too hard to get as a unit. You only have to get to a level 3 settlement in the Shrine of Sigmar. This makes them significantly stronger, and you should definitely buy. But then again, his whole thing is finding these books. So once you subdued your starting region, if you're not actively being attacked, feel free to go start the books or pick a fight. Scarbrand is located right up here. You'll probably have to take him out, though, just to subdue the region. So good luck with that. That is it for this guide for the Empire. Again, subject to change. If you watched this far, please do like and subscribe. I'm doing all the guides that I can on this game. And I hope to see you all in another video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.